On this week's episode of Made in America, we're talking Industry 4.0, workforce development, and the importance of getting parents to take tours of manufacturing facilities. I'm with Glenn Ford, president of Phoenix Manufacturing. Don't go anywhere. Hey, it's Ari Santiago. Welcome to Made in America podcast. I'm here with Glenn Ford, president of Phoenix Manufacturing. Really excited to have Glenn on. We got introduced through a mutual friend, and Glenn's been a long-time presence in the Connecticut manufacturing space. So I'm super excited to hear his story and get it on the podcast and introduce you to the audience. So thanks so much for coming out today, Glenn.
Really My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me here.
So it's the Made in America podcast. We have the same first question. What do you make? How do you make it?
Aerospace components. We're a complex geometry, close tolerance machine shop. One of the very few in Connecticut.
Okay. Who do you guys service? What are the kind of parts that you make? What would we know them as? You guys are going into aircraft, I would imagine, right?
It's aircraft. If you look up, almost every aircraft you see has a Phoenix manufactured part on it. Believe it or not.
Okay.
We're anywhere from the military aircraft, so JSF, F-22s, CH-53s, now the K model, which is recently being made down in Sikorsky.
Yep.
We manufacture parts for the 787-8, -9, -10, 777, A320, A321. I mean, the list goes on. It's just, when you look
Passenger aircraft, defense aircraft, helicopters, if it's in the air, Phoenix got a part on it, basically?
It's flying.
That's amazing.
So, and we deliver to Collins Aerospace, now used to be UTAS, which was formerly Hamilton Sundstrand.
Yep.
Pratt & Whitney, yep. Parker Aerospace. Those are our three main customers. Some of the smaller customers you might be aware of are like Erickson Aircrane.
Yep.
They put out the fires out west, so yep. We help support them.
So why do you guys make it? What's kind of the backstory? I think Phoenix is one of the youngest companies we've yet to have on the podcast. 1989, if I'm not mistaken, was the founding. So maybe kind of give us the origin story and why Phoenix is what it is.
Well, let's see. 1989, two people founded it in a garage with
yep.
two machines, kind of a shoestring operation. They were machinists, engineers. The leading founder was a guy named Lech Pollock. Mm-hmm. He founded the business, grew into a broad brick area in Enfield, started his company with another 5 to 10 people, a few more machines, kept getting those contracts from the aerospace manufacturers in Connecticut.
Yep.
And then finally moved into a 24,000 square foot building. The unfortunate thing that happened is Lech passed away. Okay. And it's amazing because this is a family-owned business that I think just has a real rich heritage in this industry.
Yep.
When Lech passed away, Christina Pollock, his wife, was handed this company. She was there. She was working on it. Most women would just walk away at that point. Not Christina. She just said, I'm going to take this business to its next level. And she reached out to another good friend, Mark DiLorenzo, very well known in the area and manufacturing.
Yep.
Mark came and grew the company a little bit further from that point forward. Again, it was a lot of smaller, less complex manufactured parts, still for mostly Hamilton.
Okay.
And then finally, in 2017, Mark reached out to me and asked me to come from a business I was working in Massachusetts. I decided to make the jump, and we moved from a 24,000 square foot building now into a 114,000 square foot building in Enfield, and it's just unbelievable. It's like state of the art. It's I 4.0.
Yep.
And which more people need to talk about. And
we're definitely going to get into Industry 4.0, absolutely. Before we get to that, just take a step back. So you talked about originally it was not sort of high tolerance precision parts initially, but you guys made that conversion. And I know there's a lot of reasons for that, but do you know enough about the history of that conversion and why that happened and sort of how that helped Phoenix to be successful?
Well, most companies in Connecticut who are machine shops today started out as a small operation in somebody's garage or a very small building. And back in the day when Pratt & Whitney or Hamilton or even Electric Boat used to manufacture their parts, they manufactured all their stuff inside.
Right.
They never really let anything outside. They had big vertical integration. Everything was inside, all the chemical conversion, all the machining, all the assembly. And then it was maybe in the 80s, early 90s when, specifically George David said, let's try to transition all of that overhead out into the supply base. Before that, because it was manufactured inside, if someone threw out a part, everyone was scrambling for it.
Okay.
Give me that part so I could machine it. And so whatever you got is what you got.
What you got.
Then the transition to let's start to let go some of our more complex machining into the supply base. And that happened. During that transition, you start to gain capability, you start to learn more about the parts. You're machining to thousands. Next thing you know, all your people are thinking in 10,000ths of an inch, millionths of an inch. Your machines are better. CNC machines today are far better than they ever were. And then as a result, you're able to take that brain power, start to really learn how to manipulate those machines and do some really cool stuff that has never been done before at that point in time. So we made that transition into the more complex manufacturing just by virtue of the fact that the machines are there, our brain power got better, the infrastructure was stronger, the systems got more impressive, and they can control things better than they ever had.
So it was really the opportunity presented itself. Phoenix decided to take that on and really kind of grow with that.
Well, I think there was a conscious effort to move into that space too.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's a much more lucrative space, right, and much more defensible from a business perspective. The more high tolerance parts you can do, the more complex machining, the less people there are doing that, the better it is for the business, I would imagine. Is that a fair?
I think our impetus really was a little bit different.
Okay.
If you do simple parts, it's easy for an OEM to take that simple part and put it in Singapore, Poland, move it offshore. And that is a bane of small family manufacturing. We depend on that revenue stream, those parts that we're manufacturing, that steady drumbeat of parts that are required to deliver to the OEMs is so important. When they move out a big chunk, could be one part number, it really is devastating to the company. Sometimes such that you actually have to lay off people. And we don't ever want to see that happen. What we want to do is increase the business in Connecticut. We want to improve the economy in Connecticut, because for every, I think the actual statistic is for every dollar that you spend on, aerospace manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, $364 is spent in our community.
Right.
So you don't want to see that go overseas. You want to keep it here. So getting from simple stuff, which is easy to outsource, to really complex manufacturing is very difficult to outsource.
So more stability in the business over the long run when you can make that happen.
Time.
So before we get into kind of the current stuff, which I definitely want to get into, I know you know a lot about it. Let's talk a little bit about your history. I'd like to get kind of personal on it. You're a Connecticut guy, kind of born and raised in Meriden, right?
Torrington, actually.
Torrington, okay, all right. And then the Air Force. So maybe just kind of give us your background. I mean, because you've worked for Sikorsky, right? You've worked for Pratt and UTC. So you kind of been in that aerospace on both sides. So just kind of give us your background, Glenn, and help the audience get to know you a bit.
That kid in the back of the classroom was always drawing pictures of airplanes or cars. Hopefully nothing else. I was the guy out there drawing pictures of cars or airplanes most of the time, and I just had this deep affinity for aircraft. I wanted to be around them. I think cars were cool, but you need more horsepower, and aircraft is it, right?
That's right.
So, then I as a result, just to be honest, I grew up extremely poor. We grew up downtown Meriden, a place called Gold Street. I mean, there was days they came home and I was wondering, how the hell are we going to eat dinner tonight? And we would actually have, my mom would do the best. She'd pull it best together, and we'd have macaroni, and she'd put ketchup on it for sauce. Okay. And I think at that time in my life, I said, I just don't want to live this life. I want to have something better. And there was no way I was going to go to college.
Wasn't happening. Wasn't in the cards financially.
But there was one thing that I did, and this is interesting, and is I played trombone.
Okay.
And I got a scholarship to go to college because I played trombone. But once I got to college, I found out there's no money in music, really, unless you're, the guy.
The trombone player, right?
I'm not trombone shorty, obviously.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so So as a result, I figured, college would be good. It was only a 2-year stint. It wasn't enough to really get me to where I wanted to go, and I went in the Air Force. It was the best thing. I mean, Air Force was fantastic. C-5, C-141s, KC-10s, all these big aircraft, fantastic. And I got into aerospace. When I came out of the Air Force, 2 places, Canada Air Challenger, which is now Bombardier,
Yep.
and Sikorsky I applied to, and Sikorsky called first.
Okay.
So it's just by
it's just by luck that it worked out.
I really didn't have a goal of which place I wanted to go into, but I ended up working at Sikorsky on the 53s right away. And then my career continued to progress at Sikorsky until I actually became aftermarket program manager for Republic of China, which was fantastic.
Yeah, that's a big job.
Pratt called and said, we need someone who doesn't do round things. There's a guy over there, he says, Sikorsky has square things. And so I moved from Sikorsky to Pratt Whitney and ended up working there, in operations, in program management, in quality. It was a fantastic, fantastic job. I would call Sikorsky and Pratt excellent academy companies. They really teach you about business if you really have ears to learn here, and you want to learn. And then finally, I worked at a place called B&E Precision Aircraft Components for a while as president. Which was a fantastic little shop up in Southwick, Massachusetts. Again, complex manufacturing, really good workforce, high level of intelligence in that place. And then you saw that I transitioned over to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then in between, I had a little short stint for 1 year to work at a place called Aurora Flight Sciences in Manassas, Virginia. Some of the stuff these guys made was just, off the charts. Little UAVs this big.
Oh, just like tiny, 3-inch UAV type stuff?
To UAVs that were 800 feet wingspans.
Well, by the way, UAVs, for anyone listening that doesn't know, that's like a drone, right?
Unmanned
aircraft, aerial vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's.
So were you in Virginia?
I was in Virginia. I moved my family down there for a year.
And then the siren call of Connecticut came back, or what brought you guys back up north?
That was B&E.
Okay.
John Willander, the owner. Again, it was family owned at that point in time. He called and he said, please come back, and I'd like you to lead the company up here in Massachusetts. I'm going to go to Florida and build another company, which he did fantastic job.
Oh, wow. So you came back up to run the Massachusetts operation.
You got it.
Oh, no kidding. And then, so now you're at Phoenix. So listen, I mean, you've done so much you've kind of been around the Connecticut aerospace kind of racetrack. And not a question I've asked before, but wondering kind of your thoughts. I see this a lot, right? People that have worked at, kind of done those, Pratt, Sikorsky rounds, and a couple small companies, maybe back, Barnes Aerospace, Utah's, whatever. Talk about kind of your perspective on the ecosystem of aerospace that we have kind of here in Aerospace Alley in Connecticut, and what value you think that brings.
Wow, great question. First off, between the top of the Pioneer Valley all the way down to the shore in Connecticut, we can build an entire aircraft. We've done it. Right. We still do. We're known now really for fabricating and building gas turbine engines, really because of Pratt Whitney. The geared turbofan is just light years ahead of anything that's out there right now today. I think that all of these suppliers, this ecosystem, who are contributing to this wonderful product, they're just on the threshold of greatness. This engine, I really truly believe, is going to become better. And the reason why I say that, it's a technology that's been around for a while, but it's a technology today that Pratt Whitney is actually using. And what they found was that by slowing down the compressor blades in the front of the engine and speeding up the core of the engine, it's just a more efficient mechanical device.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention quieter, which is, I don't know if people know about that, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'll give you something to talk about here a little bit, which is, I don't know that people appreciate how much it's not just about the fuel efficiency, which obviously is fantastic, but also because the engine's substantially quieter, you can also fly additional routes, additional times in different ways that you wouldn't have been able to fly before, which also adds significant value to the engine from a commercial perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, everything you said is absolutely true.
Yep.
I've heard stories where the pilots in on the aircraft that these are attached to. For instance, the A320 said they really can't hear what the engines sound like they used to. So it's a little bit more difficult for them to fly the aircraft because they're used to hearing noises that they don't hear anymore. And it's good for the environment. I mean, it's a greener engine. We all have to be, focused on sustainability in our ecosystem. We don't want to dump more pollutants into the air. We're getting better, but we got to continue to get better with sustainability. So, but getting back to the engine, I think right now today, the next step in the engine, and again, this is just Glenn's mind thinking ahead, is GE has a thing called the LEAP engine, LEAP 1A, B, and C. It's all really, it's the same technology that's always been around, but the difference is they're using composites and lightweight materials. So the efficiency in that engine
is it weight basis?
Is around the materials, the way that this engine operates. It's sort of like back in the days, if you would, in your car, you had a big steel wheel, and then you put a magnesium wheel on it, and you take away a lot of that rolling resistance, and it's just more efficient. Same type of concept. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but it gives a good analogy. So when Pratt, and I certainly hope they do this,
right,
starts to get into these high-tech metals and these high-tech, maybe carbon fiber fan, I think, if they can get past all the technical challenges that are associated with that engine is going to be fantastic. So all of that is the ecosystem here in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Not to say there's suppliers all over the United States, but the manufacturing here in the state of Connecticut contributes significantly to to this engine,
to these innovations. And is Connecticut, how dependent is the Connecticut Aerospace, businesses on the Pratt engine specifically versus like what might happen with Rolls-Royce or GE and the engines that they're building, right? I mean, where do you see that connecting?
I can tell you for a fact that it's not just Pratt that the suppliers here today depend on. It may used to have been that way 10 years ago, but right now, General Electric is in here, Rolls-Royce is in here, Boeing, Lockheed, Parker Aerospace. There's other companies that are growing like Triumph. Whitcraft is certainly growing more than they ever have been. These companies that used to be the established OEM in Connecticut, and all the suppliers depended on them. It's just not that way today.
So it's fair to say from your perspective and your vantage point, and I think it's important too to just acknowledge that not only have you had this experience personally, but you're also, and we're going to get to this in a second, you've been involved in a lot of the trade groups from ACM and beyond in workforce development, which I definitely want to talk about. So I want to ask you these questions because I think you do have a perspective that's beyond just sort of like what you have going on at Phoenix. So it sounds like you're saying the reliance on just Pratt, and listen, we're in Connecticut, especially kind of central Connecticut, love Pratt. They're doing great stuff, and we hope they continue to be super successful. But I think from an industry perspective, it sounds like we're broader than that too. And so we're not as reliant or susceptible even to swings at Pratt & Whitney that could throw the whole ecosystem out of whack.
I agree with that to a great extent. Globalization really has made it... It's facilitated other businesses and all these small businesses around Connecticut who've been suppliers to aerospace to go outside of Connecticut. It allows the customer portfolio for these smaller companies to be more diversified, which is important because, again, if, say, for instance, one of the big OEMs pulls one or two big part numbers from your mix, your product portfolio, the next thing you know, you're going to have a huge vacuum behind that. Sure. What are we filling it with? How are we going to be able to sustain the business? One or two part numbers can be $1 million, $2 million and hit on your revenue line, and then your margin just disappears, and it's razor thin margin all the way, all the time. It's really difficult. So. The globalization has really introduced the ability for smaller companies now to move out of the state of Connecticut, even out of the United States, to be able to go over to Europe, to go over to France, for instance, and sit down with Airbus and talk with Airbus and say, what can I make for you? You know,
Right.
look what we make over here. Can we contribute to your success as well?
And have you guys been involved in that at Phoenix, or have you been in other places? And I'm just interested, how does Connecticut stack up when they're on the global, we're in the global playing field when it comes to aerospace manufacturing?
Good question. I have a personal belief that when you're over in Europe, the Europeans look at Connecticut in particular. Our manufacturing levels up here. You guys are phenomenal. We don't have to worry about you. We're not worried about your capability. We're not worried about whether you can deliver on time. We love your quality. Every supplier that I know who has been over into Europe, who has introduced products made in the USA to Europe, the Europeans absolutely have loved them. Not to say that there's pockets where they don't, but
it's been a positive, and you're seeing a lot of good traction. So the more we get the word out there, the more we tell people what we're doing and show them, the better off sounds like we're going to be in building that wider, broader base to grow the manufacturing base in Connecticut, which is huge.
Absolutely.
So let's get into kind of that a little bit. I mean, you'd said, I didn't know if I followed all this correctly, but 2,000 square feet to start in 1989 at Phoenix, and then 24,000 and maybe something in between, and recently over 100,000. So that's pretty significant. Talk about the growth, say, in the last 5 to 10 years. What's that look like, and what do you see in the next 5 to 10 years?
Again, it's the transition between simple to more complex manufactured products. It's the transition between only having 40 people in your shop to 80 people in your shop. Mm-hmm. It's ensuring that we have really, really solid, fantastic people on the floor. The machinists have to be machinists. The leaders have to be leaders. Everybody has to be accountable. I think that the transition between the 28,000 square feet to the 114,000 feet comes down to our core values. The core values at Phoenix are determined, passionate, empathy, and integrity. So we talk to everybody who we interview, and in fact, we have T-shirts with that on the back, right?
There you go.
So determined.
Internal marketing's good stuff.
It's fantastic. Determined, to do a good job, to make sure that we can always kick the ball down the field and get a touchdown. Always deliver parts on time. Always have the highest quality, because we make aircraft parts.
That's right.
Passionate about your job. If you don't really like to work here, then, don't work here.
That's right.
We want you to be here because you want to be part of this team that's doing amazing things. And we are. And then empathy, which I think a lot of companies lose focus on, which is, being empathetic to the guy next to you. Mm. On my wall in my office, I have this picture of the 7 dwarfs.
Okay. And
everyone laughs. They say, "What do you got that up there for?" And my response is simple. It reminds me that there are different people all the time who are working in our organization, right? And I'm different than you, and you're different than everybody else, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they're all hard workers. They all whistle while they work, and they all get the job done. So empathy is a big deal. You have to be empathetic. And you have
understand that everybody comes to the table with different life experiences, a different yesterday, a different this morning, a different today, and they might be grumpy today, they might be happy today. We might feel the exact same way if our experience that day or in the past have been the same way. And understanding that sounds like, and believing it's important to you and the people that you have working at Phoenix.
Ari, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And then the last one is the integrity, right? So the integrity is, we always say integrity individually, which I really expect.
Yep.
If you say you're going to do something, get it done. That's right. It's not about, we have responsibility and accountability, which you're responsible for something and you're accountable for it too. But if you tell me you're going to do something, or more importantly, you tell the customer you're going to do something, you have to follow through on what you told the customer. Make sure that you're giving the customer the best that you can give. If you said you were going to promise that part on a certain date, then you get it to them. Schedules are unstable. It's really hard to be able to work in aerospace. Someone, drops a wrench, it hits a generator, chips the paint. You didn't plan on taking that generator off, but now you have to.
That's right.
So the customer's depending on you. So the integrity of your people is very important. But we also say integrity of the whole. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that we're a solid team, always together, watching each other's back. like I said, an old Air Force guy, right?
That's right.
No guy gets left behind. You know, you pull your guy out of a foxhole and you're carrying him with you, even if you're not really fond of him. But that's the Phoenix culture.
The like teamwork approach. Like we got to mean what we say what we mean, and get it done when we say we're going to get it done, whatever it takes to get there kind of approach.
Exactly.
And what have you, I mean, so you've only been there 2 years, you know, was that the culture and the core values before you got there and you kind of latched onto them? Is it something you've really driven more since you got there? I mean, talk about that as well.
You know, I think the culture's changed. Because from one regime to another, cultures always change. People change, and then your workforce changes. But that's just growth.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did as a leadership team is we pulled everybody into our conference room, who our leadership team. And I read a book called Traction.
Yep.
And one of the things in Traction says, well, what are your core values? Right. And some things in that book I'm really, you know, hard over on, and other things I was like, well, you know, maybe we should do that. And you know, the core values hit a home spot for me. I says, well, what is our cultural core values? So we all met. My assignment to all of our folks was, I want you to go away for a couple of days, and I want you to come back. We're gonna have another meeting. I want you to come back with 2 people who you really admire. It could be Colin Powell, or it could be your dad. It could be a teacher. Mm-hmm. It could be, you know, president of the United States. But come back with people you really admire. But don't come back with just that you admire them. I want you to tell me, what is it in their being that makes you admire them? So when we got back together, we listed everything on a board related to what these people admired in their favorite people. And the 4 core values emerged: determination, passion, empathy, and integrity. And from that point, it became clearly evident to us that, you know, we got a leadership team who believes in that. We brought it out to the folks on the floor. You know, I got to be honest, not everybody was embracing all 4 core values. But what happened was, eventually, some of the people who didn't embrace the core values, they're not there anymore.
They're not there anymore. Well, just real quick interruption on that, because I think it's so critical. You know, one of the goals of the podcast is to make sure that we're helping the community here learn and grow. You know, the rising tide lifts all boats. And so I think it's just super critical. 2 things that you just said I want to highlight before we continue on, which was, number 1, you didn't sit down and invent core values that you think were like the ones other people would respect, or that your customers would like the most, or would sound best on a t-shirt or in a marketing package. You did what I've seen to be the most successful, which is you've discovered them, unveiled them. You said they emerged. And I think emerge is really excellent kind of, in my view, description of how they came out, right? Everyone kind of went back and you looked and you saw, wow, here's the 4 values we all already share, and we can rally behind. You as the leader realize you have to drive them. I think that's super, super powerful. And then the other piece I think that's really cool is when you find those core values, you know, much like a good description of a company, I think core values attract and they repel. They should attract what we want more of, and they're going to repel the things that we don't. So I think it's super cool that that's something that you're into. And I think that you said it's part of the growth strategy. It's propelled what you guys have been up to.
Absolutely. And not only that, but I got to tell you, the culture at Phoenix is wonderful. Yeah. I walk out on the floor, anybody who walks out on the floor, you can feel it. Mm-hmm. You can feel it. And, you know, again, the attraction is so true. I never, to be honest with you, really would have expected to see how effective these core values were. Because in my past business, we had core values and we talked about them. And they were sort of, I came into the business and they were already there. Right. But this one here was, you know, like you said, they emerged through a lot of discussion. And I think it was an innovative way to find out who's your favorite person.
That is a great way. That's a fantastic takeaway, I think, in terms of how to get at that core value, right? Because instead of thinking about what the core values are, which I think could send you astray, where you start thinking what they should be as opposed to what they are, it's a great idea to say, who do you admire? And then sussing that out to get to the core values. I think that's pretty sweet. How have those 4 core values transition into what it looks like when you're on the floor? Like, are there tangible things you can see about them? You know, how do people live them, experience them? You know, you said you could feel them out there. Talk about that.
Well, first and foremost, we have what we call a roadmap It's a management agenda, and we print it and we post it on a wall. The management signs it.
Okay.
It's divided into 6 areas, and there are 4 overarching areas. One of them is called employees, and employees, that's listed our core values.
Okay.
So it's posted out on the shop floor in different areas. The other thing that I think really manifests itself, these core values are manifest through our people by, I think empathy is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
People get it. I'll walk through the shop and they'll say, hey, I got to tell you, so-and-so isn't having a nice day. This actually happened a couple weeks ago. This person wasn't having a very good day because her grandmother was ready to pass. I'm sorry, her mother-in-law was ready to pass away. And there was challenges in the family. It was a rough time. Mm-hmm. Nothing that most families don't go through. But you get through that lump on that one week, that one day, where you got these things, and as a result, that person came running to me, says, empathy. So I went back to this individual. I grabbed her. I said, come on, let's go get a cup of coffee. On the clock, in the car, out to Dunkin' Donuts. Are you okay? Is everything going to work out for you today? I'm here for you. The company's here for you. If you need to take a day off, don't worry about it. When we took off for this discussion, she was near tears. When she came back, she was joyous. Mm-hmm. She seemed a lot happier. She knew that, okay, if she needed to leave at a moment's notice, she could. But she stayed there the rest of the day and got the job done.
That's just that those little things, right? They add up. They make a huge difference. And some of the things we've talked about before is, especially in this tight labor market, what can a small business do to stand out? And I don't know about you, Glenn, but I think these are the things that small businesses can do that really make it a place people want to deploy their talent and really help us grow long term.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many different things. We have other little intrinsic things at Phoenix.
Yeah. What do you got?
We have a golf league.
Okay.
I go. We golf in all summer, and it's not open to just guys. We have ladies who golf with us, and they actually kick butt on some of the guys, which is fantastic.
That is.
And then we have we're now talking about a bowling league for the winter.
Okay.
We have Hawaiian Shirt Friday. We now transitioned after Labor Day to Football Shirt Friday, and then they're already talking about Flannel Shirt Friday at after Christmas. I know it sounds fluff and mom and pop, but those things go a long way. It makes people feel like they're part of a team. It makes them want to add. It makes them believe that the company's behind them. I think if you've got great people, your job is 90% done.
Absolutely.
You can rely on them. We were talking a little bit before the podcast. You said hiring B players is a no-no.
Yeah.
I fully endorse that. I'm trying to find, all those people, when they say find someone who's smarter than you, and hire them. I don't think people really get that.
It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to get, right? What does it really mean? So what does it mean to you, that concept of hiring someone that's smarter than you?
Well, when I go to the doctor, I hire a doctor. He's smarter than me. He knows
hopefully.
Right. Because I know they say, what's the last guy who graduates medical school?
Right. A doctor. Yeah, exactly.
But that's a joke. We're just kidding. The point is that, he is smarter or she is smarter than me.
Yep.
And she knows how to do my dentistry.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on there. Mm-hmm. Same thing happens in a business. There are financial geniuses out there. I'm pretty good in finance. I'm a pretty damn good accountant,
right.
And I'm real good at cost accounting. I know where the costs are. I know every penny. You're supposed to. But there are folks out there who are that's their life.
Well, it's their passion, right? I think I'm just going to dovetail on that real quick. I think what you're hitting the nail on the head too, right? Which is, and you said football, so I'll just put this back. I think something's always resonated with me with the New England Patriots, that do your job concept, right? And I think in business, it's really important to have people that are great at their role. And, while I might be good at accounting, you might be good at accounting, that isn't where my passion is. And I can bring someone in whose passion is that, who's going to be better at that job and smarter than me at that job than I am. And if we can do that right in every level, whether it's the setup person or sales or quality or shipping or whatever, that's going to make a big, big difference, I would say.
You got that in your life?
Yeah.
I mean, my wife is the accountant. I'm the engineer.
Okay.
And she knows that if there's something to fix, she's not going to go try to fix something in the house. She doesn't even know where to begin.
Right.
On the flip side, she is in the checkbook, every day doing the accounting. Is she every minute? I mean, if I go to Sunoco this afternoon, she'll know it.
That's right. Somebody's got to keep an eye on you.
So, you hit on one of our core values. Hire people who are passionate in specific areas where your passion is just lacking.
Yep.
And that's what to answer your question, that's what I think hiring people smarter than you is hire people whose passions in that function are greater than yours. Yep. I like to engineer parts. I like to manufacture parts. That's my big passion. It's not to say that there's weaknesses in finance or whatever, but there's people who are more passionate and smarter and brighter because they just are so into it.
Yep.
So that's what it means to me. You need to find those A players, and that's the challenge, finding the A players.
So let's get into that a little bit. I mean, so do you see recruiting and talent acquisition as one of the key struggles in Phoenix's future success?
I think that's in the state of Connecticut right now. I chair the Advanced Manufacturers Employers Partnership. They call it AMEP for short. Mm-hmm. Our single strategic vision is to retain, recruit, retain, and then train people to be able to do a better job wherever they work. Right now, we have a very huge vacuum for what I call M or I 4.0 or 3.0, either one. 3.0 right now is CNC manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. It's the state of the art today. We have not trained our previous generations to be machinists or to be welders or to be good construction workers, or even, medical's been pretty good, but there's still some gaps in it. Yep. So in the state of Connecticut, because we have let the infrastructure degrade for the vocational school system, because we have let arts and industrial arts out of our high school because of budgetary concerns. Now what's happened is we've our parents wanted us to have a better life. They wanted us to go to college. They wanted us to be doctors and businessmen and financial experts. Well, there's no machinists left. There's no welders left. There's no really good construction people who are in the trades, electricians.
Is the why behind that even really important at this point? I mean, I was going to ask the question. It is. We are where we are.
It's
how
past.
We got here is what it is.
Spot on, Ari. But now what are we going to do about filling the short gap? Yep. Okay. So we work with this Nantucket Goodwin College, Manchester Community College, to try to help the colleges understand what the curricula should be. So then when they train these people coming into the business, they're training them to do the job the right way. And then when they graduate from these institutions, they can come into the workforce and be productive workers. Okay. The other half of it is we don't even know what I 4.0 is. So I 4.0, for people who may not understand, it's the new industrial revolution where we're talking about robotics, additive manufacturing, cobots, if you've ever heard of such a thing.
Augmented reality training, all that kind of, there's some cool stuff going on in that area.
It's unbelievable. And, we have a huge robot at Phoenix, right? It's a big robotic system. The machines work with the robot works with the people. At the end of the day, the machines even give you a call. They text you and say, hey, I need you to help me run, right? And that's just, I think, again, it's Glenn's view, right? It's the tip of the iceberg on I 4.0. I really believe that there's going to be a huge depth to this that we haven't even explored yet. I took a trip to BMO in Italy. It's their technology convention. And the Italians and all of the Europeans are extremely interested in I 4.0, and they're moving in that direction very rapidly. We have to move that with that kind of velocity here in the
so
United
what are the
States.
skills that let me start with this, right? Are we headed on that path already and we need to go faster? Are we missing the mark? What kind of training are you thinking that we need to start putting into place to be ready for Industry 4.0?
Robotics, We got to teach
like courses on robotics, like get the robots, like where we used to have the sort of like the high school shop class with like the lift for the car or whatever. We'd have robots, cobots and stuff like that. And is that where you're going with this?
Right. And like, there's no panacea. There's no silver bullet here. I'm of the thinking that, the manufacturers of robots, they can manufacture certain robots that maybe they're defective in its entirety, but it still can be used. And maybe instead of scrapping it, they can donate it to a school, for instance. Mm-hmm. Somehow, some way, we have to have some kind of collaboration with the schools to improve the technology that they have in their infrastructure. Trying to move technical training, advanced manufacturing into a comprehensive high school today is probably not the direction you want to go, although many people believe it is, just by virtue of the fact that the infrastructure is wrong. Right? You got to get 20,000 amps into a high school. That's $1 million, right? So, but we have vocational schools.
So you're thinking, let's not try and necessarily bring back shop to the comprehensive school, but really look at bringing out the vocational schools, the VOTEC schools all over the state, and also the community college. I mean, you're talking about secondary ed, or you're going really all of it?
Dual track systems, right?
Okay.
So, for the vocational schools, the infrastructure's there. Improve the machines. Improve you got to get the teachers there to be able to teach the students. Bring them through a level where they can get up to advanced manufacturing. When they graduate from the vocational school, those kids, if they go to university for engineering, are going to be much better engineers than if they went through a comprehensive high school, because they know what a machine does. They know what welding's all about. They know auto mechanics. Whatever it is, they've been exposed to some really technical stuff. So then if you do decide to become a machinist or a welder, graduate from the vocational school, go into some of these great community colleges that we're starting to establish today, and take that learning another step further, improve their knowledge, improve their talent, give them 5-axis machining, give them CAD
really
and
get
CAM.
them in there to see what's going on.
And that's only 3.0.
Right.
So now 4.0, I was with Tracy Ariel last week for Manchester Community College, and she said, "Well, what do we need to do to get to the next level?" And I said, "I 4.0." And she sort of, she says, "That's a loaded question." She actually said that, and everyone sort of laughed. And she said, "Glenn, we want to get there, but where do we find the money?"
Right. Is funding the biggest constraint right now, you think? The lack of support, is that what's causing the lack of funding? I mean, what are you seeing out there? You're in the trenches on this fight. What do you see?
I think funding is a trick word.
Yeah.
If you're looking for funding from the state of Connecticut, we're on a fiscal diet right now.
Yeah.
Governor Lamont, he's really trying to turn the state around. Whether you love him or you hate him, we're getting good ratings now. Mm-hmm. Commissioner Lehman just sent out a note and said, "Hey, look what the state of Connecticut's doing. We're getting better ratings than we ever had in the past 8 years." Funding there is going to be tough to get, I believe, unless our legislators see the value in that, and I hope they do, because there's great value in that. Outside of that, there are private investors who are just trying to find ways to spend their money. Some donations are tax deductible. I don't know if our path to understanding where the funding can come from is strong enough with a community college or a college or some vocational school where we can have those funds flow in from private investors. I'm not that knowledgeable about what that system how that would look like.
Yeah, how it could work.
It's tough when you got a private investor investing in a high school or a vocational school. But, I always say, if you want to be something different, you got to do something different you've never done before. So
is there any models that you've seen that you think are doing particularly well, whether it's other states or other countries, that we could use as a platform, but initial design concept to kind of springboard things?
Oh man, you're hitting the nail on the head in every one of them, Ari. There's the Robert C. Byrd Institute in West Virginia. It's a really good model. Now, Robert C. Byrd was
Senator, well known, by the way, for pork barrel projects, right? I think like for many, many years he was known, I don't even know what the right terminology is, but bringing home the most bacon for sure to West Virginia was what he was well known for.
And he did.
Yes, sir.
One of his big pork barrel projects apparently was the Robert C. Byrd Institute, which I think is a wonderful model. What he did is he set up a big, huge factory. Mm-hmm. And he brought in these extremely expensive machines, which, small companies can't afford.
Right.
And he set up in the front a classroom as well to do CAD and CAM, because in West Virginia they needed to have their workforce learn more technology, sure, right, and get better at what they were doing. So you were able to go to the Robert C. Byrd Institute, this factory, and they would teach you. And then you'd learn how to do CAD. You'd learn how to do CAM. You didn't have to go to a college for this. And then you could work on the machines. And the companies in the area could bring their projects into the institute and actually run their parts on these big machines. If it was a success and the small company won a contract for that, then it was more likely for them to be able to get the CapEx investment for their company, right, because they knew that they were going to.
So the Byrd Foundation was almost like a test foundation combined with the school. So I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but I mean, could we take what was happening at CCAT, which is maybe a smaller version of that, combine it with like the workforce boards around the state? I've been involved with EMA, and we had Chris Jewell on here, who's been very involved with EWIB and EMA altogether. I think they would argue there's a really good model going on in the eastern part of the state, kind of with the manufacturer's pipeline and whatever. And I mean, could we build it from the different constituent parts that we have? Like, do we have the individual parts and they're just not together, or are we missing parts?
EMA, let me start there, is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good model in the state of Connecticut. I think that they're doing fantastic work down there. Again, the dual track model, having students in high school work at a community college and getting credits by working there is fantastic. If we were to go ahead and start to scale some of those models, mm-hmm, the state of Connecticut would be a lot better. The way to do that right now is there's another group called the Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Of course.
CBIA is the facilitator for this group.
Which is like a board of boards, kind of, right? Because different people from from the New Havens Manufacturer Association, EMA, which for those that don't know is the Eastern Advanced Manufacturers Alliance, right? So, but it's people that are kind of, it's an effort to the Connecticut Manufacturers Alliance is an effort to try and get a bunch of the different groups coordinated.
Correct.
Fair? Okay.
Yeah, defragment.
Yep, defragment.
Because you've got all these best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Put them into one spot.
Right.
Have everybody share the best practices, and then let's have an understanding that maybe funding, we were talking about before, might be better spent in a different area of the state, or maybe it's a collective effort to spend money across a different effort that everybody's involved with. So the Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative really has been pulled together to be able to try to defragment all of these different organizations. If we can do that, now we can send a single message to the legislative body to say, as manufacturers, this is where we believe the state should move with respect to funding, and here's what we think you should get behind with respect to different projects.
Is there enough unanimity between, right? Because in Connecticut, small state, but different pockets, right? So the East has a lot of plastics manufacturing, and then a lot of EB supportive stuff, electric boat and Groton, Central Connecticut, and up and down the Connecticut River. To your earlier point, big time aerospace, both fixed wing and rotor, right? Then there's biotech and medical device manufacturing, which is also really big in the state. So lots of different constituencies. Can we get together and get together on workforce development? Is that an area we can all agree on, do you think?
Workforce development, definitely. Again, no silver bullet. I think, time will tell how everybody is going to play in the sandbox and be very collaborative. But at the end of the day, definitely workforce development is on everybody's mind. We need people to fill the shoes of the gray exodus. It's here.
That silver tsunami, right, is everywhere.
It's difficult. There's going to be a lot of people retiring.
Yep.
Many people will retire, and when these people retire, they're going to take with them a lot of the tribal knowledge that they've learned over the past 40 years that they've worked. And if that tribal knowledge, if that brain power isn't transferred to our next generation, I believe the CMC overall sees that as a very tragic outcome.
It'll be very, very tragic. There's no question about that. Well, let's talk a little bit about, maybe one of the root causes, right, of the reduction in the focus in creating manufacturing ready people was a belief that manufacturing jobs were a thing of the past, right? But maybe not totally unfounded, right? We saw a lot of exodus of manufacturing, not just in Connecticut, but in kind of, the United States in general for a long time. I mean, I'm interested to get your perspective on, do you think that future has changed to where, we're at a point now where parents could feel very good about telling their kids or encouraging their kids or maybe not stopping their kids who are mechanically inclined from going into manufacturing because there is a 20, 30, 40, 50 longer year horizon where I'm going to have a job that I can raise a family, send my kids to school, retire. I mean, do you see that as a realistic future for the future?
I still think we have challenges. The parents don't really understand what a new factory looks like. I would invite anybody to go to the Phoenix website to just see pictures of what a laboratory-like machine shop would look like. And many machine shops are starting to look like this.
Oh, yeah.
Parents don't know that. They want the best for their children. I want the best for my children. You want the best for your children. That's just, you can't help that.
Nope.
So you're going to try to guide your children to the best life they can have. And if your vision of a machine shop, for instance, is dark and dirty and oil everywhere and chips flying in your face, the lighting is poor, and you got a boss who's all scrumpy with a cigar hanging out of his mouth.
Doesn't feel so good.
It doesn't feel so good. I always tell people, what's the difference even in business? If you were in an office that had just a regular steel desk with one, incandescent bulb.
It's like a naked light bulb over your head.
But you got the best computer ever.
Right.
You're still not going to get the work done as well as quick as if you have like a so-so computer. But, you got an office like yours. You get more stuff done based on your environment and everything that's around you. So the parents need to visit. I would urge every parent of every child who is trying to make a decision on where their child needs to go, because they know their children better than anybody.
Sure.
Some children are just not meant to go to college.
That's fine.
Some are, and that's fine. But that means what are they? Where would they go? I don't know whether Richard Rawlings is, the gas monkey guy, whether he is, he had a lot of college or not, but he certainly is in his right job. He loves cars.
That's right.
So if he was one of those kids that his parents said, if you like cars, let's go to a good, auto mechanic shop and we can expose you to that. I think that's a good thing that the parents would do. Same thing with machining. Come to a shop like Phoenix. We have, on October 9th, we have in honor of Manufacturing Month,
which we're in now, right?
Which we're in now. We're inviting the Enfield students to come in from Enfield High and middle school. I would say parents come in too, come as well, so you can see what it's like. A good example, about 4 months ago, Lynn Rasick at CCAT said to me, would you mind mock interviewing one of my people here that I think would be a good person in manufacturing? And I said, fantastic. So he came in and we went through the interview, and he was a young man and very shy. So I really tried to help him, saying, no, sit up, hey, look at me in the
interview basics,
eye,
right? Yeah. Make eye contact, sit up straight, sure.
But he's 16, 17 years old.
Right.
I get it. And then when he was finished, he said, well, Mr. Ford, thank you very much. This was really interesting. And he said, do you mind if I get my mom to come in? Because I'd like to take a tour of your plant.
Oh, that's cool.
So I said, no, absolutely. So he went out, he got his mom, and we took a tour of the plant. When we finished touring the plant, his mother looked at me and says, I would never have thought, not in a million years, that manufacturing was like this today.
Yeah.
She says, my impression of manufacturing is nothing like what we just looked at.
There you go. And I think look, that says it all. And I think there are great jobs to be had, right? And I mean, people are ready to send their kids to like medical billing school and, be like a nurse's assistant, which is fine. But I mean, that's hard work too. And I think you could, some of these people might find that manufacturing career as a machinist or whatever could be more financially lucrative for them, less stressful on their body, and more importantly, to go to the original thing we talked about, more in line with their passion. Right. I think we would live in a better society. Connecticut would be better. Everything would be better if everyone was doing what they loved, right? Because when you do something just to get the paycheck, you're not a very happy person. At least that's been my experience. Whereas when you're doing what you love, you tend to be much more successful at it and a whole lot happier. And there's nothing wrong, I would say, with being happy.
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
So I want a couple other quick things we talked about. One thing I like to ask people a lot is in business, and you've been through a lot, we need to make decisions about where to invest. We have a limited amount of resources, whether that's time, whether that's cash, and people's efforts. And there's a lot of competing things to invest in, right? So you've talked about I 4.0. So, I mean, there's IT infrastructure that enables that, Wi-Fi and regular, there's, MRPs and ERPs. Then there's, of course, equipment. There's robots and cobots and CNC machines, right? Yeah. Then there's facilities, 100,000 square foot plant, right? I mean, heck, there's parking lots, there's marketing, sales, recruiting, retention efforts. There's so many demands on time, and margins are tight because the market's competitive in every field. How do you guys at Phoenix decide where do we invest this year? What do you how do you make those decisions?
I would have to say some of it is driven by customer demand. Certain products that we bid on and we win end up during the engineering process, the non-recurring engineering process, we find that there's a capability or something in that process that we need to improve on. So that forces us to go ahead and make that capital investment, maybe, or maybe it's not even a capital investment; it's investment in your folks to learn something that we haven't known before, and so it drives you into making that investment. Other factors, such as right now today, we are in the largest increase in aerospace manufacturing that we've ever seen in our life. Mm-hmm. And that amazes me because I'm trying to think back in World War II when they were putting out so many aircraft, mm-hmm. To me, that was a huge amount of energy sure. putting out a manufactured aircraft. So now they say, they being the pundits, the analysts, like the Teal Group, this is huge. It's mm-hmm. huge. It forces you to say, do I want to be a part of the future mm-hmm. or am I happy with staying where I am today? If you want to be part of the future, you have to consciously make capital investment in your infrastructure to be able to handle more work. So that's why we moved from 24,000 square feet to 114,000 square feet because we needed to buy more machines. We made an investment in the big Fastum system, the robot that feeds 4 different huge machines. That investment we made because we want to be part of the future. But we're not stopping there. We're looking even further. You asked before, what do the next 5 years look like? Well, yeah. we know what we want our 5 years to look like because we have a business plan. Year after year, we have goals. Year after year, we want to do something different. We want to continue to grow, primarily to be able to hire more people mm-hmm. and improve the lifestyle of a lot of the people in the area and field or northern Connecticut. And in doing so, it means again, it's an investment in your people. It's an investment in the capital. So now the other half of that is how much money are you going to spend on training?
Yeah. It's got to be something, right? Because we talked about before, you're nothing without the right people, right? So, I mean, you and I talked a little bit offline about, you can have all these great machines. And one of my kind of classic lines is you give a Ferrari, to a 6-year-old, you got a very expensive accident. You give it to Mario Andretti, you're winning races. So it's really not about the machine. It's a lot about the people operating the machine. So training, I think, is going to be interesting to think about making that investment. What is your take on that training investment?
Well, someone came in and said, do you know how much it's going to cost to train these guys to do this? And I sat back and looked at him and said, do you know how much it's going to cost if you don't?
Yeah.
So, you have to trust that the training is going to bring your capability up. And we see this at Phoenix all the time. We send our folks to school. We send them to CAD school. We send them to SolidWorks, to MasterCam. We're constantly training people for our CMMs. When they come back, they're better skilled than when they left.
Do you feel like they're also more engaged?
Oh, I think they know the companies behind them.
Yeah.
Again, it's that integrity as a whole.
Yep.
You got to keep your group together as a whole. If we're going to do that, if we're going to speak these core values, we got to act these core values. Mm-hmm. So we've got to make that investment.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think training is like, I'll even call it the hidden ingredient, the hidden ingredient that's key to retention. People want to be able to, just like the company needs to grow, I think people want to grow too, right? Especially if you're bringing on people that are passionate about manufacturing, you want to grow in your passion. And so if you put someone in a corner and you never train them, they're going to find someone who will.
That's
and
right.
Those talents are gonna walk right out the door.
And how about incumbent workforce training?
Yep.
So the Manufacturing Investment Fund right now, we're looking for MIF 2.0. Again, there's the funding that the state can help us with. Don't hold back because of the fiscal diet on training the people in the state of Connecticut. Because if people learn how to manufacture, then you're going to have manufacturing in Connecticut. Services are non-existent if you don't have anything to service.
Yep.
So you have to have manufacturing first. It drives the economy. Services will drive the economy too, but you've got to have something to service.
It's so funny when you were talking about that. It just occurred to me, right? So the Manufacturing Investment Fund investing in Connecticut residents to get better at manufacturing is very much like a company investing in its employees, right, to get better. If we don't invest and make them better, other states will, and those states will reap the benefits of those investments. And I think it's one theme I've seen over and over again in talking to manufacturers, which has been such a pleasure and so interesting for me, is how many businesses in manufacturing in Connecticut started, even ones, by the way, that aren't in aerospace, started with somebody who was in the Pratt apprenticeship program or worked at Sikorsky for a while. Yeah, you're another example. Or started at, we talked about Chris Jewell from EMA, his grandfather and his partner met at Electric Boat. We've talked to Paul Lavoie and his father-in-law that started the business. He was at the Pratt apprenticeship program, and they're not even in aerospace. It's so interesting to me. And those big companies, right, they don't have those training programs the way that they used to for a lot of different reasons. And if the state doesn't step in and fill that void, people are going to go elsewhere. So I think it's been interesting. Have you found the state receptive to your talking to them about making that happen?
I think the state's making a step in the right direction right now. Again, the CMC, we put forth a recommendation. We have what we called, we wanted to have a commissioner of manufacturing.
Right.
Secretary of
Manufacturing czar, right? They were calling it.
Then Then the state, Governor Lamont's office would call it the manufacturing czar. Now I've heard they've got a real good title. It's in DECD, and it's called the chief manufacturing officer in the state of Connecticut. Quite frankly, my hope is that whomever is going to be selected for this position, that all commissioners, that everybody in the state listens to this individual, because again, if we really want to improve the economy in the state of Connecticut, you've got to manufacture something. Yep. That's what we grew up on. This area has thrived on manufacturing, our entire history. Mm-hmm. Maybe one would argue insurance as well.
Yep.
I'm not going to slight insurance, but manufacturing has been a big part of the state of Connecticut's history, and it's very rich. I really hope that we can get back and we can recover and we can get manufacturing.
Do you feel like we're in a good position right now to make that recovery happen? Or do we have the fundamental building blocks? Is there enough demand in companies here to make it happen, do you think?
The companies are here. We need people.
Right.
And if we can't get people behind the capital investments in the machining and all this new capability, which is harder to comprehend and you have to learn it, it's going to be a big challenge. Again, we talked about the gray exodus. We talked about that transfer of tribal knowledge back to, the next generation coming in. Without it, I think it'll be tragic.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to see a lot of young people really interested in machining. And, another thing, Ari, I see some folks who come out of college that are interested in machining, people who've got degrees in liberal arts or some of the more liberal art degrees, they're finding they can't get a job very easily. So they sort of use that and change their career to machining or welding, or again, go into something else that's in the state of Connecticut.
Well, it's a great, listen, it's welding, machining, getting involved in that. It's a great career, and there's opportunities in every area, right? We talked about finance, there's sales, there's actual machining and, logistics support and quality and lean. There's just so much that can be done. I think it's a really exciting time to be a part of manufacturing. And so it's been great having you on to talk about that. So as we started to kind of wrap it up a little bit, just wanted to ask you a couple quick questions. So first thing is, what do you kind of see as the immediate future for Phoenix? Continued growth here in Connecticut, more growth in the same type of manufacturing that you guys have been in, trying to fill out the 100,000 square feet. What do you see as that immediate future, that 5-year plan?
Vertical integration. We're actively pursuing a business case to bring in a heat treat facility in that open area that we have. I've had experience with that in my past job at B&E. It was very successful. I think that there were some shortfalls and gaps that we identified along the way. That's the learning curve.
Sure.
So now I think going forward at Phoenix, it's going to be fantastic. We're going to improve our non-destructive testing lab. We stood that up in 5 months. It's fantastic. We have a fantastic responsible level 3 who's doing great work there.
That's exciting.
We have really fortified our tooling area. We brought in machines that we were lacking, and now we have them there, and we're making tooling that is just so tight. It helps us do that complex manufacturing. The workforce we're going to continue to work on. We're going to strive and fight for incumbent workforce training funding and apprenticeship funding. We're going to strive to see if we can get more than just 5 apprentices being funded. So from a workforce standpoint, we're working on that. From a capital expenditure standpoint, we definitely will expand with more machines. We're looking right now at trying to fit into our CapEx plan, big horizontal 50 taper machine that can help us grip and rip material and really move it through the process quickly. And we just acquired Avery Metals, which is a really big thing for us. So we've got to have a huge saw department. Now we're open to go ahead to saw material for other companies as well. So there's a lot on the table.
There's a lot going on. Yeah,
there's a lot going on. We have the right infrastructure. We have a great leadership team.
How much has the workforce grown in the last 5 years?
When I came on, we were 52 people. Sometimes it was a little less. Today we top 87. And we're looking for more. That's
fantastic. This is awesome stuff. And so 2 more quick things that I want to get to our lightning round of questions. So the first one is, I love to kind of give the opportunity for you guys to get out here, people learn about Phoenix and what you're doing. And one of the questions I like to ask is, do you have what we call the white whale customer? Is there someone who's out there that you've been trying to get their attention and said, hey, give Phoenix a chance. We think we can do some good stuff for you. Is there a customer out there like that, or a prospective customer?
I'm almost afraid to say, I think the white whale for us would probably be Pratt & Whitney, East Hartford versus Pratt & Whitney, Canada.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm afraid to say that is because I came from Pratt, and I know a lot of people at Pratt. I've been sort of keeping the spigot off right now, because if I go to my folks at Pratt and we start to collaborate on parts that we can machine, because they need good suppliers.
They sure do. Yep.
then I call it, they love you to death. You get so many RFQs.
The
overlove, and they expect to get their parts in, manufacture them quickly, and then get them out into the floor. The issue is that it takes time during that non-recurring engineering phase to make it perfect.
Right.
And I like to take our time during NRE to make sure that everything we need to find out, we find out during that NRE phase, because that's what determines your quality going forward. If everything you do in engineering, if you do it right up front and you take your time, when you get it out to the floor and everything's proved out and it's perfect, and you lock the process, which that's my mandate for our folks, then every time you put a part through the process, it doesn't matter who manufactures it, it always comes out the same.
Yeah.
So I would say that's
probably your Pratt East Hartford is going to be the next conquest for Phoenix.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I love it. All right, let's get into our lightning round of questions. You ready?
Ready.
So hot takes, Red Sox or Yankees?
Mets.
Oh. What, Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Oh, D&D. Come on, by far.
Staycation or exotic destination for your vacation time?
Oh, that's tough. Either or.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone, of course.
Sports car or SUV?
Cobra.
If you could do anything other than what you're doing today, Glenn, what would it be?
Sitting on a beach in, let's see, Turks and Caicos and kicking my feet up.
That's it? All right. Kicking back with maybe a whiskey there?
No, behind me I'd have a garage where I could go ahead and have all these guys.
Yeah.
And I'd go head to head with Richard Rawlings, and I'd really make some gearhead cars.
I love that. What's your favorite business book?
Oh, geez. Well, right now, because we talked about it, it's probably Traction, but there's so many out there. Dave Ramsey, he always says leaders are readers.
That's right.
You have to read. You have to have a book on your table. You have to be doing something at all times. I'm going to get you to QBQ. It's a small one, but it's real quick.
It's a good one. All right. What's one thing you learned early in your career or early in your life that you think has helped propel you to the great success that you've had?
You can't do anything all alone. You have to reach out and have people help you. If you think you can solve everything, you're gonna fail. There are no oracles out there, and everybody is an ordinary person. So the ability of understanding that is really important, because you can do extraordinary things with just a bunch of ordinary people.
Absolutely. And kind of last hot take is, what's one thing you learned later in your career or your life that you wish you could go back and tell young Glenn that you think would have made a big difference?
Geez, if I knew young Glenn, probably I would go back to something you and I were talking about before. Is I'd go back and say, you don't know everything. So the most important thing I want you to remember, young Glenn, don't believe everything you think.
That's an interesting one. Yeah. Don't believe everything you think. That's awesome. We'll leave it there. Before we get to our very last question, I just want to ask, if people wanted to reach out to you, Glenn, or find out more about Phoenix, what's the best way to get you?
Email is absolutely the easiest. If you try to contact me on my phone, it's usually buried with messages. So the email is gford@phoenixmfg.biz.
All right, gford@phoenixmfg.biz. We'll have that in the show notes so everyone will be able to get it there. And our closing question, we've talked about a lot. We've been around the block on a lot of things today. And I'd just like to get your perspective for all the listeners that are out there. Of all the stuff we talked about today, what do you think is kind of, in your mind, the one biggest thing people should walk away from having learned today or take away from?
The state of Connecticut and our economy is really got a challenge with our workforce. We really, really have to improve our young folks' talent in the advanced manufacturing. If we don't do that, I think we're heading towards a tragic end. But I want to say that I'm extremely optimistic based on what I see with the state of Connecticut. With the folks who are comprised of all these great organizations like EMA, SMA, the CMC, pulling them all together, ACM, AMEP. There are people out there, there are groups out there who really have a vested interest in improving.
Workforce Alliance, EWIB, people are doing great stuff.
All of them.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I love that you kind of flipped a positive there, which is great. For me, I think if I'm looking at a business owner and I'm saying, what did we talk about today that I think could make the biggest difference for them? The emerging of the core values that you talked about, I don't know, that really resonated with me. And I think just the importance of core values, to have a team that works so well together to really get the most out of them is so important. And getting the core values by getting them to emerge from what's already there. I think that was awesome. I think if people can do that, they're going to find a lot of success at the end of that work. And I'm super glad that you shared that. So
I would bet our leadership team would all say thank you. That's a compliment.
Well, you're very, very welcome. And thank you for coming on and being part of the Made in America podcast.
One last thing.
Yeah.
My lightning round of question.
Sure. Go ahead. What do you got?
New York Giants or Patriots?
New York Giants.
Yes! Awesome.
There you go. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate you coming on. All right. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.